Today on Eric Test Kitchen, as for many rooms.
Welcome back to our kitchen, and today we've got some special guests in the kitchen. We've got Jadyn and Kevin, and I've subjected them to constant brake swaps for the last year. It's been pretty much a year. So this is the conclusion, our big brake roundup. We've all tried the Formula, the Shimanos, the Lewis, the Hayes, and the Mavens, and formed our opinions of each brake. But before we get into that, I want you to introduce yourself and say like what kind of rider you are or how long you've been mountain biking.
Yeah, I'm a new rider. I have been riding almost 2 years, but I don't ride every day like some people. I ride like maybe twice a week, or sometimes I have gone like a month without riding.
And what's your bike?
My bike, I ride a Norco Fluid. Yeah.
130 mil.
130 mil, yep. And it's really nice, and it's type of riding. Well, like if I can just go based on like Galbraith, because that's what a lot of people know, is like I really like SST and Atomic Dog, you know, the classics.
Nice.
And then we went to Port Angeles, and I loved the flow trails at Dry Hill. So fun. Yeah.
Cool. And who are you? And what kind of bike do you ride? And what's the deal?
I'm Kevin, and I've been riding for quite a while, and usually 2-3 times a week. Currently riding a hardtail, and
that you made. A hardtail that you made.
True. But I've tried these on like lots of different bikes, different setups, different configuration. I trails wise really like the Anacortes ACFL trails.
So more natural.
Yeah, natural, raw, not super steep, not super technical, but like kind of trying to find flow on natural, not flowy trails.
Cool. And then I'm Eric. I get to ride all sorts of fun bikes and race all over the world. So I got to ride a bunch of these brakes. Some of them in, the Pacific Northwest at Cascadia Dirt Cup races, and then some of them, like the Formulas, I raced Ludenville Open Enduro World Cup there, and then just gotten to ride these over the last multiple years actually with some of these brakes. Okay, so to finally wrap this up before we get into our individual reviews, we're going to do a little bit of brake theory, just so that people are on the same page. All of these are hydraulic disc brakes, which means they have hydraulic fluid in the hose, and we've got a lever with a master cylinder and a caliper with, in most cases, 4 pistons, but there's 2 or 4 piston models that we tried. And I think the easiest way to think about how these work is it's leverage between the lever and the caliper, and it works in some ways like how your gearing on your bike works, in that you have something like the lever would be like your crank, and then you've got your chain ring, which would be your master cylinder, and then the chain connects it together, and then it's a single speed. You've got your rear cog size, which is the size of the pistons, and then we've got our rear wheel, which is our rotor size, and then our tires, the grip, which is the brake pad. So there's a lot of factors that make a brake work well or not as well, and it's important to understand a little bit what those things are. Notably, the master cylinder and piston sizes are similar to gearing, like I said, and so varying those sizes affects the hydraulic leverage of the brake. And similar to how on a bike, if we just talked about the size of the gear in the back without knowing the size of our chainring, or the size of our wheel or a lot of other variables, it wouldn't really mean a lot. Like there's so many other variables that we can't just say, oh, it's got 18 millimeter piston size, that's everything. It's a rundown of how hydraulic brakes work. Kevin also has a different way of explaining.
Or you understand how they work is, do they stop me or do they not?
Yep. Do they work? Can I stop? All the bleed kits and bits. Okay, which one do we want to talk about first?
I think we should start with this one.
The Lewis. Okay,
Yeah.
I think that's a good one. Okay, so the Lewis LHT, a lot of people know it because it looks like a knockoff Trick Stuff Maxima, and that's all that people think about is like, oh, it's an Asian copy. But if you look beyond that, they are actually completely different to the Trick Stuff Maximas, besides maybe some styling cues. They have a 9mm piston and 4 17mm pistons in the caliper, and that is the same as the Maxima. But then what's different is they have adjustable leverage and a bite point adjustment. So that's kind of the technical rundown. Oh yeah, they use Hope brake pads as well, like that size. Okay, so Jadyn, what was your initial impression of the Lewis LHT?
Yeah, so I had these on my bike the first day I rode my bike, actually. I'm pretty sure, or at least the first week. And
when you built up a new bike, you had Shimano's before, and then you switched to these.
And it was really weird riding a new bike for the first time, but also it was really weird because of these brakes. Kind of like they moved while I was using them, and it was really sketchy. They wouldn't stay.
So, the clamps on these are not quite the right size. No matter how much you tighten them down, you can't actually tighten them down further, and they're a little bit oversized, so you have to like put tape around your bar. So right off the bat, some issues with the kind of tolerances. I also had a total saga just even getting these brakes to work initially. So before Jadyn tried them, I had ordered these from Lewis, which involved sending an email, and I paid, I think, $300 for the set, which might have been a hookup deal, I don't know. But put them on my bike and rode Darrington Enduro 2 seasons ago, and then immediately took them off because the rear brake failed in practice. And so then started emailing with them, and there was an issue where it was basically leaking out of this diaphragm, and no matter what, I tried to bleed them, everything, it was still leaking. They sent me new parts, which I think I have here somewhere. Yep. So they did eventually end up sending spare parts. That didn't fix it either, and so then I just sent the whole brake back to them, and then they just sent me a whole new brake, and then that one's worked. So I can say some issues, but also they were really good about replacing it, but it took a little while because it had to come from China. So kind of a rough start with that. Kevin, what did you think of the Lewis?
Well, my first experience with them was on more of an enduro full suspension race bike, and like jumped on and thought like, wow, these are really strong, and then as I switched them over to the hardtail later, after a bit of riding, I started to feel like wow, not only are these strong, but it's strong right off the bat, and then it's like after the first initial bite I wanted more power, but didn't feel like I was getting it. We played with the leverage adjuster a little bit, and still didn't really change that. And so in hindsight, I felt like my initial experience was, wow, I can break my tires free really easy with these, and that that made me think they're strong. but it wasn't really what I want when I'm riding. And after a couple rides with them on the hardtail, it just felt like, okay, they were a really strong brake. If I was riding really steep stuff and I needed that initial bite, I might go back to them, but for kind of flatter, more rolling riding, I just felt like it was too much grip or too much power and bite for the grip that I had and what I needed out of them.
Yeah, I felt the same way, where there's a crazy amount of initial bite on these brakes. Like the wow factor in the parking lot is amazing, where you're like, oh my gosh, it's like twisting the fork.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you're actually getting into the trail, like into a gnarlier trail, the power somehow isn't there. Like it feels like the bite is hard, but then the more you pull, there's not really any more power. And I do think there's actually a reason for that. Like I think the way the leverage is set up, no matter how you have it set, it's digressive. So it's actually giving you less leverage as you pull the lever more. And I've seen that mirrored online. And I think that is also something to touch on, is Lewis is iterating like crazy. By the time you buy a Lewis brake, it might already be out of date because they're trying to figure everything out on the fly. And so, you kind of have to, like, they still sell these brakes, and I think these are a really solid option in their lineup, but now they have like 10 different brake options, and it's really hard to decipher what is what, and maybe there's a different version that is better, but it's super hard to tell what it is. And then we also had a friend at an enduro race who had a similar but updated lever version of this that was even more fiddly to adjust the leverage, and then it ended up breaking, and he just switched on a different brake, which was a similar experience to what I had. Like, it wasn't just my experience. I've seen other Lewis brakes have this issue, and part of that I think also comes from you can adjust the leverage too far and then it'll cam the piston, and that was a whole nother issue I had where it scoured the inside of the master cylinder, and that had to be replaced. I forgot about that. All that to say, Lewis, I would say, is not our favorite, obviously.
No, and in fact, I was just thinking when I was listening to you that they're the only brakes out of these that made me feel like I was at risk of like going over the handlebars a lot.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's just that power, like you said initially, it doesn't feel like, oh, it's so strong, it's good. It feels, oh, it's so strong, it's kind of scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think maybe, like, it's interesting to me, like, knowing there are World Cup riders that race successfully and
totally
go fast on these brakes. I think one of the things that we kind of get to with all of them is like tuning the whole setup. Seems really important, and this was the brake that made me first really clue into that. Was like, oh, like I would need to try different pad compounds more. I would need to adjust my rotor size. I would need to start,
for sure,
even thinking about what tires I'm running with the brake. But it does, like that initial bite, it's like, man, is there a way to set this up to where you really maximize that trait, and they work really well in certain situations? I think that's possible. Like, I don't know that I would write them off. I think they've done some really cool things. And
the value is there. They're really, compared to a lot of other kind of machined fancy brakes, they're half the price. So.
Yeah, they're light and they look cool. And yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a place in a rider that it might make sense for. Would I put, given the brakes on the table, would I put my money down on those? Probably not.
Yeah, and we'll get to like our final selection at the end. I do want to put one other note. I did try in all these brakes. We tried various rotors, 203s, 180s. I didn't have Lewis rotors. All the others, we tried the OEM rotors and aftermarket rotors of some sort, or just mix and matched. And then I did try like MTX pads and stock pads in all of these brakes, and some of you did too. My experience is that, credit to Lewis, their stock brake pad is really impressive. It's it's interesting because I think that's part of the strong bite, and it's almost too much. Like, they almost made if it's possible to say this, they almost made their brake pad too good. And I do think that, like you said, with tuning, the MTX felt a little bit more manageable, but also still quite strong, but it didn't get rid of that kind of digressive, like, where's the power gone feeling. Okay, we gotta move to the next one. What's next?
Kevin, you pick.
What do you think?
I kind of feel like following that up with the Maven. Just
Yeah.
talking about like a brake that's known to be really strong, but jumping on this brake and immediately feeling like, oh, there's manageable power. And one of, like, maybe if my test on bite and manageable power is like a stoppy test, like, the Maven actually was one of the best brakes I've ever tried, like right off the bat.
Yeah.
I didn't get as much time on the Mavens, but in the rides that I did get, it was like super comfortable, would be happy to run it. Again though, from just the whole experience, the Maven would be more brake than I really need or want for most of the riding that I do, and it really made me think about tire choice. And like, if I was running a big meaty gravity tire, then I would want the Maven to go with that, and it'd probably be the brake of choice in that situation for me. For more rolling terrain, not as steep, or smaller, more cross-country tires, it just breaks free, too much power.
Yeah, totally.
And I think,
Well, and I don't think they're selling this as a cross-country brake, so that makes sense.
Yeah, clearly not.
Yeah. Before we get ahead of ourselves, we tested primarily the Maven Ultimates. These are the limited ones. I bought this kit from the Bike Lab in Anacortes. Shout out to Jake. The Mavens have a 9.5 millimeter master cylinder, and then they've got a 19.5 and an 18 piston. So that makes them hydraulically the most powerful brakes, just like mathematically speaking. So that's worth noting. There are different versions. There are Maven Bronze that have the same size piston, and then there's the Maven Base that are newer, that are dual 18 mil pistons, and those would have a little bit less leverage, so it would be a little bit more manageable power, but I think still more powerful than all the rest of the brakes on the test. So an interesting option that we haven't tried yet. I tried both the stock compounds, the semi-metallic and the metallic. You did too, because I switched it partway through. And then also I've ridden a different bike I'm riding right now with MTX pads, and across the board it was almost indistinguishable. So I would give them kind of a neutral score on their stock pads, not more or less powerful than the MTX. Jadyn, what was your impression of the Mavens?
Yeah, so these were the ones you just took off my bike today. So I've been riding these for the last couple weeks, and at first I really was uncomfortable with how the levers felt, and in fact, like, I think that was my main reason why. Like,
before you rode it even?
Yeah, I was just like in the yard riding it around a little bit to like feel them, and I was like, oh my gosh, these are hard to pull. So I think that's like a takeaway. I have like not super small hands, but not super big hands, and it was just really hard to feel like I had the power to pull those comfortably. And in fact, another thing is like even just the way it felt holding that, like not even pressing down on them, but like riding just with my fingers on them, kind of just felt a little uncomfortable for me too. That being said though, after my initial impression of being like, this doesn't feel very comfortable, I rode with them and I loved the way that they work.
What was your initial impression?
My initial impression was way different than the Hayes brakes that I've been riding mostly, because they feel way harder to pull down, so finger strength is something to consider. And they're a little bit like stronger pulling, I guess. Like they feel a little more oomph when you actually get them down. And you know, it's nice to have that strength, and like maybe it's a good thing to like feel like there's a delay in like them hitting that point, because then you're, I don't know, maybe it's supposed to feel smoother or something. But
it doesn't feel smoother.
But I don't think it does. I don't know. I want to give it a ride on a trail and see how I fare.
Like a longer downhill.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing you said was, I want my Hayes brakes back, right?
Yeah. Well, because is this my 4th brake that you've had me on this year?
Yeah.
Yeah, and after the last brakes, which were the before the Hayes.
The silver ones? The formulas, I think.
Oh, yeah, the formulas. I was like, I really want the Hayes back. And I think we were going to go do an enduro, and I was like, I want to feel like the most confident on my brakes.
Yeah, you've gravitated back to the Hayes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the Lewis, what did you say about power? So those feel more powerful.
These feel really powerful, and I said that I think the Lewis felt the most powerful to me, but in a way of like, as soon as you touch those, I feel like I was going to go over the handlebars.
Yeah. So those don't have quite as much of that feeling.
No, but like these are definitely the ones where you're like, you need the most finger strength.
Yeah.
Like you really gotta get them, and that's why I'm like, I don't know if that delay to actually braking is a good thing or not. I guess I'm gonna find out.
Yep. All right.
Okay, so we just did a downhill. You saw it, maybe? I don't know. And I actually am surprised by the brakes. Like, it's kind of hating on them at the top a little bit, but they felt really smooth. Like I didn't skid out at all, and part of that's also my tires, but like, yeah, it just felt really safe and smooth, and it's really slick out, so it's a good test. Yeah.
So you actually like them a little more than
I thought I would.
Cool.
And honestly, I was just focused on riding, and I wasn't really like trying to micro-analyze the brakes. But I think that's a good thing that I didn't really feel the need to.
Yeah.
That I just was riding and having fun.
That makes sense. So you don't want them immediately removed from your bike?
No, I think we should keep going and see if they hold up the rest of the trail.
Yeah. Did your fingers hurt? Like, did you get arm pump?
No.
All right. Perfect. Should we keep ripping?
Yeah. So I think it's really smooth. I think, like you guys said, it's really powerful. And I think that it doesn't make me feel out of control like the Lewis brakes did. It makes me feel in control, especially on steeper parts. And I was just telling Eric before this video that like I wouldn't be upset if he didn't take them off my bike. Like,
all right.
The only thing is that uncomfortable kind of feeling I have with my hands. So, yeah. But I really like the brake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You did a tire swap partway through with these brakes on.
Yeah.
So going from like the Wicked Wheels to more of a, what'd you say?
From like a light trail to basically enduro tires, so like an eddy current in the front.
Okay.
So beefy tires.
Did you notice like anything with that switch as far as the brakes and like traction?
Well, it's interesting. I didn't really think about that because I don't know all the science of brakes like you guys and those things, but I definitely think actually having the Meteor tires on and these brakes felt really good. So maybe that was helpful.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that these are a strong brake, and I got these pretty late in the game. Like, Mavens had been out a while when I got these, and I had been kind of like, like the initial reviews that people had of Mavens were that, the lever feels terrible, they've got all these issues, whatever. I bought these, and I was expecting them I was expecting to not like them, similar to you, and then I really liked the Mavens. Like, I was coming from the formulas and then the Haze to these, and I'd been having overheating issues on the other brakes, and then I put these on for the Darrington Enduro, and it was a year later than the debacle with the Lewis, and I had 0 issues, and they were amazing for the whole race. And I was just like, I didn't take them off for the rest of the summer because they just were that impressive to me. Like, they were consistent, the bite point stayed the same, and they always had enough power, but they didn't make me feel sketchy. So I think, yeah, the Mavens are actually quite impressive, and it's kind of annoying because I thought I had already figured out my favorite brakes, and then I tried these. We didn't try the Maven base, and that would be something I'd be interested to try because those are supposed to have a lighter lever feel, so that could be something down the line. But anyway, the Maven Ultimates are solid.
I kind of want to add, like, I didn't notice the lever feel at all.
Really?
Like, yeah, like you guys talking about it, so like I have no recollection of a feeling that they feel, firm or any of that. Like, I just jumped on them. They felt intuitive. They felt like I could stop hard.
Yeah.
But I could also manage that, and that was what stuck in my head.
Yeah. And to clarify, the lever pull force for me is not an issue. It's more the lever shape and ergonomics is less comfortable than the Haze. Just, it doesn't feel as good under my finger. Like, there's like a hot spot or like sharp edges, but the pull is totally fine. And also, I would still pick these. So anyway, that is the Maven Ultimates. Next up, I think we should talk about the formulas. There are 2 different formula versions that we've tried. There's the Cura 4 piston and the Cura 2 piston. We haven't all tried all of these versions, but I've had a set of Cura 2 pistons since 2018 that I built up a Transition Sentinel with. They're like my first time venturing out of Shimano SRAM brake land. So I just put these Formula Curas back on my trail bike, and I'm just always blown away by how solid the free stroke is. Like, they're just so touchy like that. I'm blown away. These brakes, I've been running these on various bikes since I think 2018, and they just keep running great. And they're light and relatively powerful. They're the 2 piston version. And interestingly enough, these were a brake that both Loic and Finn ran, and Finn won his junior world champs on these. So I think they're the last 2 piston brake to win downhill world champs. And the reason I got them was because they were a good price. I saw Finn Isles was running them back then, and they had this fancy little quick connect where you could disconnect the brake hose and run it through your frame, which ended up being really handy because I kept carrying those brakes over without bleeding them all the way through 5 different bicycles. So I have a ton of time on the Cura 2s, and I think they're a really solid option. And then the Cura 4s were given by Formula to us to try after I put a little thing about how I thought these were great brakes, especially because they have 0 problems. Like, you tried those same brakes that I had in 2018. Like, you've ridden those brakes in the last year, probably. Maybe that was 2 years ago. But those brakes are still around, and I think now they're on the cross-country bike that was the cross-country scholarship bike, and they still are dialed. You did have to bleed them.
I mean,
eventually,
but I bled them
but
after they'd been sitting in a box
for like a year and a half.
Touched them for years,
Yeah.
and so when I put them on, I did a fresh bleed, and they felt really good.
Yeah. Yeah. So another thing with these is we can talk a little bit here about the 2-piston versus 4-piston difference. So these have the same master cylinder. It's 10 millimeters. So a larger one gives you actually less power relative to a smaller one. And then here we have 24 millimeter single pistons or 18 millimeter on the 4 pistons, which, okay, so it's an interesting thing. How does that compare? And it's actually not as large of a difference in mechanical advantage as you would expect. It's kind of like ordering 2 small pizzas versus 1 large pizza. It's actually sometimes more economical to order 1 large pizza. But in this case, the power difference is, I think, like less than 10% mathematically. And in practice, I think that actually kind of does hold true. I found that these, were actually powerful enough for most like trail and enduro applications. These have slightly more power, but then you also get a mushier lever feel for various reasons, more seals, and So the other thing with these is there's 2 lever options, like the Lewis. They make a new lever called the FCS, which has a small amount of leverage adjustment, and then the reach adjustment as well, which I think ties into your kind of one experience with the Cura 4s when we put those on. What did you think of them?
Well, as I told Eric when we were talking about these brakes, is like, I don't hardly remember the feeling of these brakes. And I think that that's like something that is important, is like they weren't very memorable to me compared to the rest. And I remember like I rode these on Orcus, and I felt like it was totally fine. Like I don't remember having anything that was like super bad or super great about them that stands out in my mind. But I do remember that before we left for Capital Forest Classic Enduro, that I wanted to switch out of these brakes.
Yeah, and I think the reason, if I remember, was that we couldn't adjust like the range. Even for my hands, I was running the levers as close as I could, and it still felt almost too far. And so for your hands, I think the levers were just way too far away, and there was no adjustment range to get them any closer.
Yeah, I think I do remember that.
Yeah, so you didn't run them for a long time because you just weren't
It didn't make me feel very safe.
Yeah.
If I didn't feel like they were close enough.
Yeah, and I do think that's the thing with these new levers, is they actually got rid of some range. On the old original levers, they're just like the simple ones, you can actually run the levers a lot closer, and that's the one you tried. What do you think of the formulas? You've tried the 4 and the 2.
Yeah, I've tried both of them. And I feel like the non-memorable, like that's a really good compliment in some ways, of like these were brakes, both of them, that again I might tune a little bit, but I could run on any bike. Like if it came on, I would run them. The main experience with the Cura 2s was there were a couple of instances, and it was really when I was pushing the bike I had them on out of its intended range. So trying to chase my son on an enduro bike down enduro trails on a hardtail with more of a Trail XC setup, and it was like, well, duh, you don't have the same amount of power. But riding my home trails the way I like to ride, like they worked well. When I went to the 4s, it definitely felt like it was more of a comparable experience in what I wanted out of them to run a smaller rotor. So the 180 rotors, with the 4s and a 203 with the 2s. Like, I felt like there was more power I could have gotten out of the 4s if I needed to bump up to a 203. And so if I had to buy one of them, I probably would buy the 4s. Without getting into other, like, comparing to some of the other things. I guess comparing wise though, I don't know, maybe you don't want to do that yet, but
comparing to other brakes.
Yeah,
we'll save that to the end.
Okay.
So one note, I ran the Cura 4s in Ludenville for the Open Enduro World Cup, and I also ran the rotors that they sent, which are these 2-piece rotors, and I had serious overheating issues in Ludenville. I'd ridden these at the Cascadia Dirt Cup in Port Angeles and hadn't really had those issues. They're a little bit shorter runs, but then on the long, like, alpine runs, I was just cooking the brakes. Like, I burned through the metallic brake pads, the stock ones. I was getting major discoloration on the rotors, and so I think part of the reason is that these are 2-piece, but the heat can't really transfer to the center. Kind of like the Ice Tech Shimano rotors are designed to transfer the heat, and these just don't have that ability. And so there was less mass of steel, and it was just saturating with heat by the bottom of the run and just totally overheating the whole system. And I think the caliper, the brake pad, and the rotor were all just heat soaked, and it stopped working. So when I got back home, I switched to a Hayes rotor, which is similar surface area, but it's just a 1-piece steel rotor. I don't have one right here, but that solved most of those issues. And then I also tried MTX pads, and those seemed to actually manage heat a little bit better. And so I think that the formula pads, the stock semi-metallics that come in there, not very good. The metallics a little bit better, but the MTX were actually significantly better. And so I think that means that the formula stock pads in any configuration are not good, is my takeaway. I do think they make a thicker 1-piece rotor that would be significantly better than these lighter 2-piece versions, or just any 1-piece aftermarket option. And then the final note is that there are some aftermarket, like, Originate, like, bike shop brand centered pads that exist for the 2 pistons that are amazing. So if you can somehow track, they're awesome. Like, I think that the more I've tried to do to these over my original 2-piston, like, bike shop pad setup with normal rotors, like, it's just overcomplicated it. And, like, if you just want a really lightweight, affordable, simple trail bike brake, get the Cura 2s or the Cura 4s, but treat them as a trail bike brake. They're not like a Maven or super fancy, but they're just going to keep running without any leaks or any issues forever, for years and years and years. And I think there is a lot of value in that. And then also there are options for the quick disconnect, which is super handy for certain frames, etc. Okay.
I'm trying to remember, there was something funky with the bleed, like, where I was able to basically bleed it without the right tools, and it really wasn't hard at all.
That's another thing with these. They have literally 3 bleed ports on the caliper, so you can use their syringes, which I have their bleed kit, or you can put a Shimano funnel on this end. Like, if you take it off, you can do, like, all sorts of stuff to get the bubbles out. I've used Shimano mineral oil in them, no problem. Like, it's never been. I think you did too.
I think I just bled it into a rag. Like, literally put something on one end and then let it all drain to the other. And
totally.
And it worked really well. That was super impressive. I feel like noting, like, what you're describing of the super long, hot runs, like, man, that's so far outside of my and probably most people's normal riding, right? Like, if you're racing, you're grouty, you ride in a bike park all the time, then that issue makes sense. But, like, in a lot of times simpler, or a lot of ways simpler is better. The 1-piece steel rotors, like,
for sure.
I've had a lot of luck with those. Like, and these, they were simple. You put them on, they worked well. I didn't have to touch them.
Yeah. The bite point never changes. Like, they just keep going. That's been my impression with them. Okay. Speaking of bite point, I think we should talk about the Shimanos. I have a 4-piston Shimano non-series brake here that came off my e-bike, but I think Kevin and I have both ridden many different iterations of Shimanos.
Yeah.
2-piston, 4-piston. I even got to ride the newest XTR stuff on Jordy's bike in La Tuile. Jadyn's ridden the e-bike with these, but hasn't ridden the Shimanos quite as much. And then spec-wise, they have a 10 millimeter piston, and then they have a 15 and a 17 millimeter caliper pistons, which means they have less mechanical advantage than any of these other brakes. But there's a big but, which is that they use what's called Servo wave in pretty much every version of Shimano brakes. It has this cam system that dramatically increases the leverage as you pull the lever. So opposite of what we were talking about on the Lewis, where it felt digressive, the Shimano lever is progressive. It's ramping up significantly as you pull it, and so that's where, like I mentioned earlier, there is the hydraulic aspect of a brake, the size of the master cylinder and the caliper pistons, but there is also leverage related to the lever and then using cam systems like Servo wave. So all that being said, Kevin, I know you have some things you want to say about Shimano, so
I think we should let Jadyn share her impressions first.
Jadyn's I don't have much to say, but I rode these on your e-bike a few times, which your e-bike is way too big for me.
Yeah.
It's so heavy, but sometimes I want to keep up with you, so I ride it. So I rode these on Highway 20 actually, and that was like quite a long ride, and I thought that they worked really well and felt very safe on the bike. And then just not too long ago, when you got your e-bike put back together, you're like, hop on this thing and like try it out. And I just rode it around the yard a little bit, and it was just like my immediate impression, not even thinking about this brake video at all or brakes at all really, was just like, wow, these brakes work really well. Like, they're so strong, especially on that big and heavy of a bike. Like, they're really good.
Do you want me to say something?
Yeah.
Okay. So I also like these brakes, for the record. I've had issues with Shimano brakes where the diaphragms have popped or the levers have worn out, but the levers have worn out because I've ridden them for a long time in terrible conditions. And credit where it's due, this brake is probably findable on the internet for very low price. Like, this might be the least expensive brake on test here. Obviously, we're kind of talking about Shimano brakes generally because they're just so common and we've tried so many different versions, but this is the one that I've held on to because it's just been really solid and strong on the e-bike. I've ridden also, I keep talking about Darrington, but that's like a 20-minute long run there and you're using your brakes a lot. I've ridden that e-bike all over the county here, in Whatcom County and Skagit County, and these have been great. I usually run them on a 203 Hayes rotor actually, which is a little thicker. It's like a 2mm rotor instead of the Shimano, and these have MTX pads in here, which in my experience have been great, but also the stock Shimano pads I think are quite good. I would say maybe even a little bit better than the MTX pads. I just think these are solid. Sometimes I do feel a wandering bite point on these, but it's not enough that I care. Like, it doesn't matter. I guess a note on trying the newest Shimano brakes, like the XTR with the new hose direction and everything. If you look, it still has Servo wave, it still has a 10mm piston, and and it still has the same caliper piston size. So it's effectively the same brake as this. And in my experience, it did feel exactly the same. Maybe they did fix the wandering bite point on this newest generation with new oil, whatever, but I do think spending like 5 times as much, you're not getting that much more value over this like non-series 4-piston brake. Yeah. Kevin?
Yeah, so I guess I should start saying, you know, like my opinions, I have lots of opinions, and they're kind of biased because this is the brake that I choose to run, and not only on my bike, but on all my family's bike.
So you're maintaining like a couple bikes for your
I've
family?
Got 4 bikes, and I'm running the same brake, you know, maybe 2-piston, maybe 4-piston, maybe it's a Deore, maybe it's an SLX, maybe it's an XT. The thing is it doesn't matter. Like, I can swap components, you know, from one bike to the other. The same set of tools works on all of them, you know, which is true for most brakes, but you know, part of my decisions are influenced by the fact that I already have the Shimano bleed kits, and it's just, I know how to take care of them, I know how to make them work.
And you can get parts at any bike shop.
Yeah, and so like if this brake, if I had to buy a brake so that I could put it on whatever bike I was going to end up running and take it anywhere in the world riding whatever terrain I found, the 4-piston Shimano Deore is probably what I would buy. And I would recommend that, and like, it's going to work well. Are there things that are, you know, can be finicky at times? You know, like the levers, like, honestly, I am not positive I've experienced what people call the wandering bite point. I think I have, but I think that I have a theory, and maybe like comments can like blast this, but most of the time in my riding, I can pull the brakes and let them all the way off. And when I do that, I've never felt wandering bite point. When I pull them partway and then let them partway, or pull them and then let them partway off, and it's a long, you know, like I'm following somebody down something, it starts, like, I have felt that where they go, and so I just let them all the way out and pull them again, and it feels like that reset. So I often wonder if technique isn't part of, you know, terrain and technique, right? Like, if the terrain you're on doesn't allow you to let it all the way off, and these brakes wander where they bite each time, like, that's fair. But if you can be somewhere that you can be all the way off and then pull them, it's never bothered me. Easy to work on, super reliable. I mean, I've busted probably 6 or 7 of these levers on trees, and I keep replacing them and going back. Anyway, I love them. And you mentioned the progressive. I think what I really discovered through this test is that I'm used to that progressive lever feel. And so, like, a strong bite right off the bat, I choose to run metallic pads on all of them that I'm running. Family members might not, but I like that strong bite of their metallic pad. But I do feel like I can then pull harder and deeper into the stroke, and it gives me more power. And so that I really like, and I found that there's lots of great brakes, but that trait is probably going to make me stay with Shimano.
Totally. Yeah. A note on rotors. I don't think Shimano rotors are my favorite, and you might agree on this, but in my experience, they're stamped, like SLX level rotors are quite thin and not always the best, like, tolerance wise. They're fancier, kind of like ice tech stuff. It does work, I think, in terms of cooling. This one is a center lock, like, cross country rotor, and it does really well with heat considering, but they're also thin. And then I I've had more instances of glazing for some reason, like the pads on Shimano Rotors. Like I had an Orbea Occam with XT brakes, and for some reason, like it was just always glazing. And then I put center lines, just simple like one piece steel rotors on. They're a little thicker, and in general that just feels a little bit better on the Shimano brake. What do you think about that?
I think, you know, when the Ice Techs came out years ago or were first popular, you know, everybody was talking about heat, and I've tried them back and forth. And again, I don't ride in places where I generate a lot of heat over a long run, and so it never felt like a performance gain to me to have the Ice Tech over the SLX. Originally, like years ago, the SLX rotors were great. I loved them, recommended them. They're cheap, and what I found was the SLX rotors, they're solid steel, and the Ice Tech ones aren't. And so I would bend the Ice Tech ones easier than I would bend the SLX
and then you can't really
ones.
bend them back.
And it was, and so that I was like, it's not worth to me paying the more money. I'm not seeing a performance gain. I went to the SLXs. You know, there were comments a couple years ago about SLXs starting to have more jagged edges on the stamped. You know, like a run of them that had weren't as smooth out of the factory, and you know, in looking at them, it was like I can kind of see like a shiny, glossy finish, and like kind of see that. And so, like, I tried center lines at that point because I had a set, and they've worked well. And I guess that's the best I can say is traditionally I've had really good luck with the SLXs and loved them. I think if you prep them right, then they work really well. But center lines or haze or other things have worked just as well with them.
Yep. Okay. You said haze, and now it's time for our last break. Okay, so now we've got the Haze Dominion A4s, and then I also have Haze Dominion A2s on my cross-country bike sitting right over there. They have a 2-piston and a 4-piston version, just like the formulas, and in this case it has, I actually took it apart to measure because I couldn't find it anywhere. It's got a 9mm master cylinder, and then it's got 4 17mm pistons. So that makes it more powerful than most of the brakes on the test other than the Maven, purely from a hydraulic leverage standpoint, but it doesn't have any sort of fancy adjustment or leverage or anything in the lever. It just has a pretty simple direct drive, but the pivot location is very close to the axis of the master cylinder, which means that it's less digressive in my experience compared to the other ones. There are also 2 different lever options. There's a small finger lever and a standard lever. Yeah, what else? I got these brakes from Haze. They sponsored me like 3 years ago for a couple years, and then I also purchased the Dominion A2s from backcountry.com, and I've had very many sets of these, probably like 4 or 5 sets that I've sold on different bikes. I have bled many sets of these, and they are a little bit of a pain. The bleed kits that they come with don't have seals, and the hardware, I haven't stripped any out, but people do strip them out. The fit and finish of the brake is probably not the best. Like there's just like weird not finished like gaps and things like that. And then also when you're bleeding, if you over pressurize it, the diaphragm will start leaking, and I've seen people who don't know just like put a ton of pressure on there and like blow out their diaphragm. The nice thing is that Haze has a really good warranty, leak-proof warranty, so they will just send you replacement parts. You just have to email them, in my experience, and they'll just send you the thing you need and you fix it. And when they are working, they're really great. Speaking of the levers, that is a big defining feature of these. Jadyn, what was your initial impression and what did you think of the Haze?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly when you first put them on my bike, but I remember really like feeling like that. My initial thought was just like, this is so comfortable, like the feel of the brake levers. Another reason why I kind of took to these brakes was because I felt like, unlike kind of having the Lewis's first, like these did not make me feel like I was going to come to a sudden stop and like maybe go over the bars. These felt like, okay, I'm getting the amount of stop that I need, but at this like calm, like kind of level that made me feel in control. And I mean, I don't really love to ride super steep stuff, at least not yet, working my way, but like medium steep, and these have always worked really well for me. And in fact, like when I had the formulas on, when I was gonna go do the Capital Forest Classic, like Enduro, I wanted these on because I was like, these just make me feel really safe and comfortable, and they're comfortable, and yeah, so.
Yeah, they just work, they stop you. In my experience, yeah, the lever feels really good, the power's pretty good, and as long as they're not having a problem, which usually comes after 2 years of use, you know, and mud and all of that, like they're great. When they're working, you just keep putting new pads in and the power is there. Once they start having issues, then it can get a little sketchy, but you just have to hit up Haze and get replacement parts. The other thing is I have managed to overheat these a few times, mainly like long runs, but I think I've pretty much been able to overheat every single brake except for the Maven, so that's on me. As far as pads go, the semi-metallic and the metallic pads that they include both in the box are quite good, and I think actually a noticeable step better than the MTX. So kudos to Haze for making really good pads and including both of them in the package. The 2-piston version, similar to the formulas, also uses a 28 millimeter piston size, so it actually is even closer. It's almost identical in some ways to the 4-piston version here. The biggest difference is that this has a longer brake pad, so you have more friction, and I think that is where a power difference comes in, and you have more heat management that way. All the technical jargon aside, what did you think of the Haze?
I thought they were a really great brake. I mean, similar to the formula of like, oh, this is a great brake, I could run it, it would work well. Which kind of highlighted to me like, oh, the XT, like the Shimano brakes have a different trait. And I've gotten used to that trait, and I because of that, I prefer that trait. So, but I think these were a brake that was like, this is a really good brake, and if I, had to start over, like I might go with these and then learn how to, just adjust to it. One thing you haven't mentioned that I think is worth mentioning is, I think these are called their crosshair screws.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to align the caliper, the first time I saw these in a shop setting, it was like, oh, that's so cool. In reality, like it's just another tool as far as getting everything set up and aligned. But it does kind of make it like it is a pretty cool tool to be able to set those and adjust using a wrench, just a really fine-tuned adjustments. If your rotor's bent, you're still doing the same stuff as everything else, but yeah, that's a cool feature on these that I wish maybe was on some others. It's not a like, oh, I'm gonna buy it because it makes setup so much easier. But overall feel of them was really good. I think I also tend to run my lever a little farther out than both of you and a lot of other people, and so like these they feel like they're what people like about them is you can set them really close and there's a really fine, like, light lever feel. I didn't really notice that, again, because where I set my levers, and I just think I'm not thinking about how hard I'm pulling as much as what's happening to the bike. So I didn't notice that.
You must have strong hands.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all. Like, I don't know.
Exactly, yeah. I think when I first put these on your bike, Jadyn, you have learned a lot of braking technique since then, but these made it easier to learn. Like, these were way more forgiving in that they didn't have a super strong bite, but they also have a lot of power, and you could learn how to not skid really easily with these. And I feel like I remember you talking about that.
Yeah, they're great learner brakes. Yeah, for sure. And then you work your way up to the Mavens.
Yeah, but it is worth noting that these have won World Cups. Like, these are also very powerful. And before the Mavens came out, like, thinking about when I first got these, when, you know, I was riding for Forbidden, I think, in like 2020 or 2021, these were by far the most powerful brakes I'd ever ridden. And it actually took some getting used to the power, and things have just shifted a lot. And so I think these still hold up in terms of power. It's just that now things are finally going to the point where we might even be hitting too much power. And I think that was my impression before I tried the Mavens, was like, I wrote the Mavens off as like, why would I want more power than the Hayes brake? These were my baseline forever, and I think they still are a baseline. I do want to mention another little nerdy technical aspect, which is that they have a contact point adjust that basically does nothing, kind of like Shimano, in that you just want to run it as close as possible all the time. But then what you can do is take this apart, and you can adjust the position of the plunger a little bit if you do want it to be like, there's some like advanced tuning that you can do on these. That's all I want to say. But yeah, otherwise they just work. Yeah. Okay, so now we're gonna put them all in the middle, and we're gonna grab the ones that that we want to take home with us or put on our bikes. So, you ready?
Yeah.
All at the same time, or?
Well, you might have to fight over them, but I don't know if we do have to fight over them, you know?
It's like that spoons game.
Yeah.
You guys might have to fight over them.
Yeah. All right. 3, 2, 1.
All right.
Okay. Well,
I wasn't expecting you to grab the Hayes.
Oh yeah. If these had more comfortable levers, maybe.
Okay.
But these are just classic.
And have you tried the small finger lever?
No. No.
Maybe you should take them home and try.
But I like this lever. Yeah. No, these are just like so comfortable. I really love these. And maybe if I get into more steeper riding one day, I'll really want these. These are really nice.
yeah. So your choice was the Hayes.
The Hayes, yes.
And then my choice was the Mavens, and Kevin's choice,
It's the Deore.
Shimano Deore, tried and true. All right, that is a wrap on our brake roundup. It's been a good 2 years of testing. Thank you guys for letting me subject you to this, and I hope YouTube land enjoys the varied perspectives. I am sure they enjoyed it more than just hearing me ramble about piston diameters, and yeah, so thanks for that. And of course, leave a comment or two of your favorite brakes or something like that. We want to know your opinions.
Get nerdy.
Yeah, nerd out. All right, thank you guys. That's a wrap. Kevin's got a secret.
They gave me 2 of these shirts and they're really comfortable.
He's been bought out.